Well, I was desperate for new work from yourself, and it was really great to see some of the rough edits. I've really enjoyed the episodes that I've seen. Um, I found the personal stories very moving. I thought the episodes were just fantastic. Um,
Thank you.
I thought after covering like the worldly issues of power, terrorism, and freedom, it's almost like you've come home to Britain or maybe England, and that this is perhaps your most personal work.
Well, let me just well, it's personal in the sense that I have always wanted to try and take the subjects that political journalism and historical journalism and make them more involving and more emotionally involving. I've always wanted to do that because I grew up in television thinking that a lot of this is not a criticism of people, but thinking a lot of work was very dry and very dull and a lot of off-putting to people like me. I mean, I would never watch it if I was at home. So I just wanted to try and make it more involving. And and what I discovered is that if you work on something like iPlayer, it gives you the space and the time and also a different sensibility among the people watching it to allow you to do something that's bigger and more involving, more open, more complicated. So in that sense, yes, and this is the biggest exploration I've done so far, where I've actually, in a way, what I've tried to do is to do in factual terms what novelists used to do with those big multi-part novels back in the 19th century. I mean, everything is real; it's all factual, but just have the feel of a novel where you get lost in that world. So as well as following the argument, you're following the characters, and then every now and then I step in and say, well, what this meant was this. So you brought back to the ideas, but you're also still involved with the characters. And one thing I didn't want to do, in documentaries, there is a tradition of every now and then screeching to a halt and coming to a very contemporary bit of overlit video interview with someone in the present day whose job is really there to say, yes, you're right. That always breaks the mood.
Yeah,
Always breaks the mood. So I've got rid of all that in this. I mean, any interviews are contemporary interviews from the time.
yeah,
I just want to keep people in that mood. So in that sense, it's not personal. It's personal in the sense that I like the idea of creating a kind of emotion. Someone once described me, I do emotional journalism.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I get that.
Great. When I first spoke to you in 2014, it was before the release of Bitter Lake, and I just crossed paths with you in the office, and I asked you what you were working on, and you replied, I think, TV that responds to the internet. I reflected on that later, and I thought he must mean choice, recalling the choose your own adventure novels from my childhood. No, but then in 2018, Charlie Brooker had produced the Choose Your Own Adventure program, Bandersnatch for Netflix. I wonder if you'd seen
Yeah, yeah,
it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, leaving aside streaming infrastructure, how do you feel now how TV has responded to the internet?
Well, what I meant by that was actually the very opposite of what Charlie has done.
Yeah.
I mean, the geeks, the nerds, always had this idea of you. It's this idea of the internet democracy. You can choose your own ending.
Yeah.
I have this sort of other attitude that actually, if you're telling someone a story, they don't want to choose the ending. They want to find out what you think the ending is. You know, they want to find out what happens because there's a sort of sense of desire that goes with the story like that. What I meant by what I was saying to you is, and I still don't think a lot of my colleagues have quite got their head around this, is that making stuff for Netflix, sorry, for iPlayer and for Netflix, but basically for online, gives you a completely different set of opportunities than making stuff for television. And the reason for that is not just because you can make them longer. It's because, and this is what I was saying to you in that short phrase, was I had worked out back then that people, when they watch stuff online, have a completely different frame of mind. And they do it in a completely different frame of mind from when they're watching television. Yeah? And that you know yourself, when you're watching stuff online, you're in a much more expansive mood and you're prepared to make jumps and click between things and you let your mind drift. Now, you do that when you're just researching and going through Google, but it's a different frame of mind from that slightly more prim, upright attitude that people have when they're watching television. And because you've got that new sensibility, it allows you to tell people stories in a much more complex and involving way, because they're prepared to go with you, which in a way they would not do if it was on television. Yep. And so then I went off and made Bitter Lake, which did exactly that. There were points at which I would go off for 3 minutes and have a song, or one shot for 3 or 4 minutes, because I just wanted to explore that. And I discovered that people really like it.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that there is a thing of our time, which again I think is we haven't worked out. We haven't even scratched the surface of iPlayer yet. Is that every age has a sense of not what is real, but what feels real. And you know yourself that, and there's a massive shift in that has gone on in the last 5 or 6 years because of the internet. You know it yourself. You spend your time online jumping, making association links, and letting your mind drift, as opposed to the much more sort of rigid storytelling of even 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And that allows you to do all kinds of new things, I think. And iPlayer is just waiting to do it. And actually what I then discovered after I'd spoken to you and then went and did Bitter Lake is it's not really like making films. It's like publishing a book. It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, I made Hypernormalization. We stuck it up. I put I don't know, 10, 12 chapter headings on it. People can bookmark it, and it's still there, you know, and people go and read it, watch it like a book. Yeah. It's very, very interesting.
In a strange way, it brings me back to the Choose Your Own Adventure books. But you've laid out exactly why what you are doing is different to what Charlie did. So who else is doing?
Can I point out though that the Choose Your Own Ending books died very quickly.
Yes.
They failed totally, because to be honest, people didn't want that. Charlie did it as part, because he always sort of is playing with that nerd tech area. He did it as part of that. In terms of actual success, I remember it in the early part of this century, all those tech utopians going, yes, we're going to let the people choose their own ending because it's a new democracy. People don't want that.
Yeah.
But our job in the BBC, one of our jobs in the BBC is to actually take people out of their confined lives and offer them something they hadn't thought of or experienced. And part of that is telling them stories that takes them places they hadn't up to this point imagined. Yeah. It's part of the sort of central social and moral purpose of the BBC. Mm-hmm. I think saying to them, "Will you choose your ending?" is a bit like saying, "No, go on, you go stick in your own life, mate."
Yeah.
You go on.
Who else is doing good stories at the moment? What TV have you enjoyed in the last few years?
Can I tell you the terrible truth? I don't really watch much TV because, and this is not a criticism of anyone in the BBC, I feel that television's got to that stage where you sort of know pretty much within about 5-10 minutes how it's going to end.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't surprise me any longer. It really doesn't. I watch some dramas, but I just feel that television has got to this stage where it's become what I call a reinforcing medium. Its job is to say to people, yes, you're right to think this. Yes, you're right to feel this. Yes, the world is full of dark paedophiles trying to get your children. Yes, the world is full of these dangerous things. And part of the things I'm trying to say in this film is that, in a way, the culture has become a very rigid thing in our society because it confirms you, especially today, in that pessimism.
Yep.
I did an interview with that very good actor called Diane Morgan.
Yes.
The other day, of The Guardian. And we were talking about television. She came up with a great phrase. She said, yeah, it's always so predictable. They're either someone who's had their children kidnapped and it has lots of shots of a detective gazing at a lake, or it's full of people baking cakes, and that's it. And I thought, that's sort of quite... I mean, I know I'm being rude about television, but I don't see why I should.
I liked Diane's last series, Mandy, just because they were like they were 15-minute shorts. In a way, it was like an internet genre of comedy. It was,
and they were brilliant because what was good about the Mandy stories is you never quite knew where they were going.
Yes,
you really didn't, and I think that's what I'm trying to get at. Is there are so few things now that you don't know where it's going. Actually, that thing that Michaela Cole made called "I May Destroy You."
Yes.
You really didn't know where that was going, and I love that.
Yeah.
But most things, you know where they're going, don't you?
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know. I just think, well, if I know where this is going, why do I bother to watch it? So I go off and read some pretentious science fiction, no, a trash science fiction novel,
Yeah.
or watch a movie,
Yeah.
because I think sometimes movies are a bit more inventive these days.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, changing themes slightly. In part three, you plot the rise of Arthur Sackler's Valium and later OxyContin.
So, yeah.
I've just finished reading William Davies's Nervous States: How Feeling Took Over the World, and the chapters on pain and OxyContin confirmed what I think you hold to be true, and that is how I feel is the only truth, and perhaps we've been taught that by those in power. So your latest series is called Can't Get You Out of My Head, An Emotional History of the Modern World. Why did you want to tell an emotional history, and do we need one as a third way in response to the battles between facts and feelings?
No, because what I thought, I mean, you're right. I mean, I made a series called The Century of the South back at the beginning of this century, where I argued just that what marks out our time is a shift from the idea that you are told what to think and to feel by patrician group organisations like the BBC, and what replaced that was an idea that no, what you feel inside you is the truth, and and you should follow that because then you can express yourself as an individual, and I suppose that's sort of the thing I've been tracing ever since, and that William Davies book is partly about that. Why I did it as an emotional history, because what I think is that if that is the society we live in, what has happened, especially over the last 20 or 30 years, is that the forces of power in our society have found ways of getting inside our heads and mixing themselves up with our feelings. No, it's not a conspiracy. It's just that, and we've let them do it because the downside of that individualism, because that's what we're talking about. The downside of it is that when things are okay, it's quite glorious. You're not being told what to do by the patrician BBC. You're doing what you want to do. When things go bad or are frightening, you're on your own, and it can be quite scary and quite lonely. And one of the things I really wanted to do in this series is try and explain why, in an age which was supposed to produce the empowered individual, confident and accessing their own feelings, has actually ended up now with millions of us anxious, uncertain, totally distrustful, not just of politicians, but of what we're told by the BBC, by anyone. How's that happened? And to do that, I decided you've got to do the history of what went on inside people's heads as much as you do the history of what went on outside them. Mm-hmm. And the relationship between the two is the key dynamic of these films. I'm just trying to explain why we feel so uncertain, why we feel so fearful of the future, why we feel so stuck and can't imagine anything else but this, but we also don't like this. How's that happened? Well, it's inside our heads as much as us being told that. You know, it's, we're scared.
I'll come back to that later. One of the most memorable quotes from your previous iPlayer film, Hypernormalization, was the Liberals expressed their outrage online, and so it had no effect. The illiberals in the US recently expressed their anger in the real world with the US Capitol attack of January the 6th. Obviously, Facebook and social media sites were heavily blamed for the violence, and obviously the mainstream media wouldn't miss an opportunity to criticise a competitor. Is there a way for the BBC and other objective media organisations to return to be accepted as arbiters of truth?
Yes, of course there is, but only if they do the thing that they're terrified of doing, which is to actually open up to the public, to their audience, and say, we're sort of a bit like you. We're not quite sure what's going on, but we're going to use the time, the energy, and all the information we have to do the best we can to try and understand it. At the moment, and this is the really complicated thing that the BBC hasn't, I don't think, fully worked out with its audience. A lot of the BBC still pretends to know what's going on. Yes? Yeah. Whereas in fact, we know that they don't, and they know that we know that they don't. Yes? That introduces a feedback loop of insecurity, which makes the BBC more uptight and more frightened. and people feel that, and they feel that. When you can feel someone is uncertain, even when they're being really certain, you can feel it. People sort of feel that about the BBC at the moment. What the BBC has got to do is to find a way of acknowledging to its audience that it's not going to tell you everything with absolute truth. Not truth is the wrong word. It doesn't know everything, but it's going to try and take you. And this is what I'm tasked by the BBC to actually say to people, no, look, have you thought about looking at it like this? Just make you think, because people at the moment are so hunkered down, so in the braced position, frightened of what's going on. They've frozen their imagination of thinking about what's going on. And in a way, I think that the older way of the BBC, which was to say, we know what's going on, that's not going to work any longer. And the audience know it's not going to work any longer. And it's got to find a way forward which says, we sort of know what's going on, and we've got resources, and we've got information, and we've got really skillful people, and we're going to do our best to do it, and we're going to do it with you to try and find out. Yes?
Yeah.
Because actually, that's a realistic way. The audience would then say to themselves, yeah, that's probably the best you can do at this present moment, because everything is so confused. As opposed to, because what's actually happened is that factual journalism, for all sorts of reasons, has been colonized by opinion journalism. Yes? That's the real problem. And really, and they're using opinion journalism to disguise the fact they don't know what's going on. I mean, the real problem for a lot of people who used to be held in high esteem, like journalists, like think tank people, like politicians, is that people, it's not that they don't distrust them any longer, they know that they're slightly less confident than they pretend.
Mm-hmm.
The audience know that.
Yeah.
But because those people won't admit it to the audience slightly despises them, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So like in a kind of an honest reckoning is.
Audiences know when you're not being honest. They really do. Yeah. Yes. and therefore you've got to be honest with them. Really.
Yeah.
That's the key thing. And you've got to find a new modern way of being honest with them. And that is to acknowledge the limitations of what you know.
Yeah.
That's really good. That would be really, really good, because in a way that is truthful about all journalism. We don't know everything, but what we do have is the time, the ability, the resources, and some of the confidence to do it. That would be really good.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so a question about one of the characters, if I can call it that, from your series. The enigma of Russia continues to mystify the West, and already this year we've seen exceptional scenes caused in no small part by the detention of Alexei Navalny. One of the characters in the series is the Soviet dissident and Russian writer Eduard Limonov. Could you explain Limonov's methods for challenging power, and if Navalny could learn anything from him?
Well, I love Limonov because he died last year.
Yeah.
He's like all the characters in these films. They are people who I think their lives take you through the modern world, or the roots of the modern world, in a slightly heightened way. And he's a fascinating character because he starts off as this sort of completely rebellious dissident in the 1970s in Russia. He hates the older generation. He's booted out and sent off to New York, where he becomes part of the punk scene in the Lower East Side, writes a completely scabrous novel, which is a really brilliant novel called It's Me, Eddie, about how America pretends that it's a democracy, but actually it's just completely run by money and everyone's become robots. In this sort of simplified world where everything's judged by money, comes back to the Soviet Union, and in the 1990s begins to realize that what he saw in America, in New York in the 1970s, is pretty much what's happening in Moscow. That what you're getting is that wave of money coming in whilst pretending that it's democracy. And of course, it doesn't end up with democracy. It ends up with Vladimir Putin, and what we're called the oligarchs. In response to that, he says something which I think goes to the heart of it, and also the heart of the problem for liberals, is what Limonov says is the real problem with money is it doesn't believe in anything. It creates a society where everything is measured in utilitarian terms by money, but it doesn't actually have a story to tell you about the future. That's its weakness. And the only way to fight it, he says, is and this is where he becomes frightening and dangerous, but I also think very interesting. He says the only way to do that is to go back to nationalism and proper nationalism and re-evoke stories from the past. He says this not because he's a nationalist. He's going back to the things we have forgotten about and we don't want to know about because they're too frightening. It's the early roots of things like fascism, which basically says you can make the world the way you want it if you have a powerful enough story. We're terrified of that because the last time they tried it, it led to Hitlerism and fascism. But it's a very, very powerful thing. And he challenges Putin like that until, as I show in the last film, Putin, a man who believes in nothing, when Navalny comes along in, 2011, 2012, and starts protesting, Putin begins to turn to nationalism. Just as what Limonov, he sort of borrows from Limonov. Yeah. And the interesting thing about Navalny, just as an aside, although he is being very brave and challenging Putin, and many of the liberals in Russia really support him, they're also suspicious of him because he's also a nationalist. They know, and it's this terrible, terrible, terrible thing that the liberals on the left cannot face up to, which is that if you want to get the people on your side, you're going to have to tell them an emotional story. And the easiest one is the one that's already inside their heads, which is a nationalism. The left are terrified of doing that. They were terrified when Brexit happened because of that. But the only way to do it is to get that, or invent your own powerful emotional story strong enough to beat that. And no one's really done that yet. And that's why people like Limonov and Navalny are making the running. That nostalgia, that sense of a powerful story that unites people is very, very strong. Yep. And that's one of the things I'm just trying to point out in the films.
Okay, thank you. The series covers conspiracy theories from all angles. Conspiracies resulting from the secret actions of elites, conspiracies propagated by those in power, even conspiracies invented by individuals to highlight their absurdity that come back to challenge the inventors themselves. Last year, America was rocked by multiple crises, and the conspiracy theory of a deep state secretly ruling America is so virulent that it could even tear the Republican Party apart. Could you share your thoughts on why conspiracy theories are so prevalent right now? Do they offer anything useful to movements, progressive or conservative, or will they always end in paranoid collapse?
Well, you're right. They will always end in paranoid collapse because they tend to eat themselves because they're driven by suspicion, and you just become suspicious of everything, even the story you're telling. Why they are prevalent at the moment is because, I think I argue in the films, is that we tried to create a society in the West in which there weren't big stories any longer because of what I've just talked about, because Hitlerism, Nazism, totalitarianism, communism were all about big stories that swept people up and were seen to have led to horror. Well, not seen to lead to, they did lead to horror. In response to that, we tried, or the generations before us tried to create a society in which individualism would replace that. You would live in your own story. You would be the confident individual. What these films trace is how that dream, which was magnificent and wonderful, has decayed into a load of disempowered people, very frightened of the future, very uncertain and very anxious, because they feel on their own, and because if you try and invent a society without big stories, when things go wrong, people have no way of judging how big or how dangerous it is, because what a story gives you is a sense of proportion. You know what you are part of. And in the face of that, people turn to invent their own stories to try and make sense of the world. And I argue in the films that it's not just the right and the nationalist right or the ethno-nationalists, like with QAnon. It's also the liberal and the left opposition. Yeah. I would argue, I do in the film, that the idea that Vladimir Putin colluded with Donald Trump to get him elected is also equally a conspiracy theory as QAnon. They are both both sides have just gone down rabbit holes, and they've gone down those rabbit holes because for two reasons. One, we are living in a society where all big stories, all sense of purpose, all sense of meaning has gone. So everyone dives down the rabbit hole. They've also done it to disguise the fact, to hide from the fact they don't have any alternative ideas of how to solve it. So conspiracy theories are both a response to an emptiness of meaning in the present day societies. They're also a brilliant smokescreen to hide even from yourself that you don't know what to do about the future. Yeah? So you can actually spend your time stuck in a feedback loop shouting at Donald Trump on Twitter and not have to think about how to build a better world. I mean, really, I'm quite not that rude, but I try and point out in the last film that many of the liberal opposition and Donald Trump got stuck in a sort of codependent relationship in the last 4 years. They really were like that. Yep. Sort of both shouting at each other in a pantomime and not seeing what was happening to real power outside. That's why.
Absolutely. Yep. I found that one of the strongest themes that runs through the series is the issues associated with individualism and collectivism. History reminds us of the atrocities done in the name of nationalism, and your series also highlights the failures of individualism. Part 4 explores this with the stories of Julia Grant and Chai Ling, both of which are incredibly moving stories. Perhaps...
Yeah, they are, both of them.
Yeah, just amazing.
What I tried to do was have characters that although they were ambiguous and flawed, you liked them. You understood them where they were coming from.
Yeah.
Go on, sorry.
So perhaps the 20th century's most tangible achievements for people are the civil rights movement in the US and the women's movement in the West. So will the 21st century movements demanding action on climate change and Black Lives Matter also succeed, or is power too entrenched? Will our system allow these changes?
No, I think power is not half as entrenched as we think it is. I do think you're right about the civil rights movement and the women's movement, especially in the 1960s and 70s. What marked both of them out is that there were mass movements that didn't in which people didn't try and express themselves or become heroic figures. Yep. They just worked. I think that's the really interesting thing about both those movements, is that they were full of working class, middle class, black, white people who gave up a lot of time to actually fight again and again against entrenched power and against entrenched habits in people's minds. And if you look back, yes, there are one or two people you can point to as the central leaders of it all. But really what it was they were mass movements in which people, I suppose, gave themselves up to something that they thought was more important than their own individual lives. And then somewhere in the late 1970s, you got this rise of a hyper-individualism in which radicalism became somehow associated with the idea of expressing yourself, at which point you got all sorts of radical movements coming out of art and culture and music. What you lost in that was that sense of giving yourself up to something. What's very interesting about the Black Lives Matter movement is that it's sort of recapturing that, because it's the first movement that I've seen for a long time that says, no, it's about power. It's not just about changing people's minds. If you want to change society, you've got to change power. And they really want to confront that. For a long time, the climate change movement didn't do that. And I got really pissed off with the climate change movement because they would just be a bunch of think tank people sitting around and saying, oh, if only we can hold the Earth's temperature down by 2 degrees, we'll be okay. Completely ignoring the fact that the climate had been screwed up by a system of power that ruthlessly exploited all kinds of things in society. And if you really want to change the climate change problem, you change the structure of power. Black Lives Matter is the first movement I've seen for a long time that's actually saying that. So I think it's great. And the Green New Deal. What Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says is really good, because it's saying, it's not sitting around saying, oh, we're going to die if we don't hold the temperature down. It's saying, no, we can actually start changing things now by changing the structure of power and actually changing the nature of industry, doing all sorts of things that would actually help people in the here and now in the depressed industrial areas in America and in Britain, as well as changing the future. It's really a good idea, but it's taken 30 years for them to get around to it, because it was all about think tankers sitting around going, oh, we're all going to die. Well, come on, liberals, get a grip.
Yeah. Thanks. Quick question on the news. Most people experience the world through a media that doesn't know how to do anything other than make people nervous. The pandemic has obviously exacerbated this. Partisan news is so stimulating and profitable that after Times Radio, the UK media is about to get the launch of GB News. How can news media improve its reporting and objective truth-telling in the face of such client journalism?
Well, I have a heretical view on this. I think that what you call partisan journalism, is that what you call it? Yeah, is actually not the beginning of something; it's the end of something. It goes back to a shift in journalism that happened really towards the end of the 1960s and the early 1970s, which was intimately related to the rise of individualism. There was a thing called gonzo journalism. There was a thing called the new journalism, led by a man called Tom Wolfe. And then there was what was called gonzo journalism, which was, there was a guy called Hunter S. Thompson, who was the great exponent of that. Yep. And what it was all about was actually, I'm going to tell you what I feel in a situation as the journalist. You've now got the end of that, a decayed end of that in what you call partisan journalism, where actually just people express themselves and don't tell you any facts at all. None, zero. And I think it's the end of something, and it feels very old and very old-fashioned. And what I think is that every now and then in history, or modern history, journalism reinvents itself and finds a new and imaginative way of describing the world to people where they go, oh yeah, that is how I see the world. And I went back and did some of the research on when did readership for newspapers fall away. It started way before the internet.
Okay.
It started in the early 90s. And the reason is because the journalism became so boring and so predictable. Yes? And really what the BBC is a very good place to do, this present moment, is to reinvent a new kind of journalism, because it doesn't have the constraints of the Murdochs around it. But it's too frightened. It thinks that partisan journalism is the future. It may not be. It may actually be the end of something. Yeah.
Yep.
It's a sort. It's. I don't know. That's my optimistic view. But what it means is that those in the BBC and news have got to sort of like make an effort to, I don't know, just invent a new way of seeing, a new way of describing the world to people, so people go, oh yeah, no, I get that. Yeah. You touch on the way they see the world. At the moment, we don't really touch on the way they see the world. Every now and then we do, but not often.
Yeah. Okay. So part 5 covers the British Empire and the creation of invented histories around the folk, which the middle classes could find solace in, a nostalgia for an imagined past. I couldn't help but place the BBC in a similar league as another relic of empire. The BBC is under new management at a time when there is renewed pressure from all sides, political pressure and pressure to inspect many aspects of our history, like the empire. Is the BBC, both factual and drama output, able to do this when myths seem so central to the British state?
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, you can be part of something yet be aware of it.
Yeah.
You? I mean, it's as simple as that. It's just you have to acknowledge it and not pretend to be a part. To be aware that you are a part of it, but also can. I mean, it's what I do. I mean, the BBC asked me to examine those sort of things, and it's very good that it has the confidence to do that. Yeah. No, I have a sort of weirdly optimistic view of the BBC's future, which is that actually, faced by the new systems of power that are completely locked into a sort of strange, weird vision, we are in quite a good position to actually pull back and examine it in a more objective way. I think we are. I think that doesn't mean that there aren't problems, but you can be part of a post-imperial tradition and yet be fully aware of what it all means. And in many ways, maybe it's a good thing. to be aware of it, as well as to feel it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because the key thing is, and this is again that the Liberals and the left really have a problem here, is that there may be lots of people in this country who think and feel strange, nostalgic dreams of England that were never true whatsoever. But you're never going to get anywhere unless you go and talk to those people, access those feelings, and why those feelings are so strong. If you want to change the world, if you want to report things properly, you've got to connect with those feelings. Even if you're frightened of them, even if you don't like them, it doesn't matter. They are there. Those people feel them. They have a nostalgia. The liberal middle classes have a nostalgia about a lost Britain. It's all there in their heads. You've got to go and somehow connect with those feelings. And if you want to change them or explain them even, you've got to connect with them. But at the moment, over the last 4 years, those who you would put in, the progressive side of things, have been very frightened of going to connect with those feelings. And what they've done is hidden behind a hysteria about Dominic Cummings and Vladimir Putin and Cambridge Analytica. It's as a way of hiding from their duty, and it's our duty as well in the BBC, is to go and connect with those feelings and understand them. Really is important. And not be frightened, and not behave like a sort of Jane Austen heroine who faints when a horse goes past, which is what a lot of the Liberals at the moment are doing. They shouldn't do that. Mm-hmm. They should actually. It's part of your in the BBC. You're part of that society. You've got to go and connect with that and understand it. It doesn't mean you have to approve of it, and in many ways you can try and actually transform it or make people pull back and see what they're feeling. But you've got to go and connect with it. And that's what we should be doing. And we're in a very good place to do it.
Great. That's great news. Thank you. Just one last quick question then, just to end on. I wondered if you saw the video going around of the exercise class in Myanmar with the coup taking place in the background. Someone added Suicide's Dream Baby Dream to it, and it worked absolutely perfectly. So there's a lot of people out there, I think, very ready for your new series. So,
how do you know that wasn't me?
Okay, that's a conspiracy.
It wasn't. That was good.
That
was the best one by far.
Yeah, it was good.
The other ones didn't think much. Did you think much of them?
No. There was. I saw about 5, but Dream Baby Dream just fitted so perfectly. It was sublime.
Yes, it worked, didn't it?
Yeah. Just something about it is perfect. It's almost like a trailer for your series. So
yeah, my bar of marketing worked quite well.
Yes. Why do you like TikTok?
Because in its crazy, wild, stupid way, it reflects, it expresses now, and the strange mood of now, which is that there's absolutely no one has any idea of the meaning of anything. In its wildness, it just says we're just going to have fun.
Yeah.
Yes? Yeah. What I really don't like is Instagram, because what I feel is that Instagram reflects a sort of primness in the face of the emptiness of our time. It just goes, I'm just going to watch. I'm going to go and take photographs, and I just want to watch. Whereas what TikTok expresses is in a time when you're just wallowing in a million fragments of stuff and you have no idea what it means, you're going to have fun and turn it into wonderfully. I mean, a lot of stuff I see on TikTok is crap, and also I really get pissed off with the algorithms that lock you in one way. You have to play a game with the algorithms to get out of it, the tunnel it's taking you down. But I love its wildness and its stupidity, and also I have discovered an area of TikTok called alt TikTok, which is where a lot of radical political ideas are being discussed in ways that are very imaginative. And to go back to the thing about journalism, I look at it and I think, well, that's probably where the journalism in the future is going to come from. It really is. And I think probably in about 50 years' time, we'll look back at this age and all those pompous novels and pompous documentaries that try and explain this age will be completely and utterly forgotten. And TikTok will be seen as the great expression of it. Whereas an Instagram is the sort of Jane Austen ladies in the countryside having nice cups of teas and trying to avoid what's really happening. Have you seen there's a brilliant Instagram site which shows how whenever anyone takes a photograph of a place, they always take the same photographs as everyone else. That there's the idea of self-expression on Instagram is a complete and utter myth. It's a fantastic. I did a whole video with Massive Attack using images from that. It's just that they all take the same photograph, whereas actually on TikTok, you never know when anyone's going to go. It's great. I love it. Do you like TikTok?
I don't have it, but I've enjoyed a few things that have come out this year. Obviously, the sea shanties was glorious.
Yeah. I mean, also what I like about it is the paranoia when it got mixed up with big power politics in China.
Yeah.
And I just thought, I love this. That you've got people, squirting instant cream into Crocs and then putting their feet in them, mixed up with Xi Jinping and Donald Trump and geopolitics. I just thought it just appeals to me.
Yeah. It's still banned in America, isn't it? I think
it is.
I know. It's just extraordinary.
Yeah. Right, I should go. Very nice to talk to you, Adam. Thank you very much indeed. Those are good questions.
Thank you very much.